Hey everybody, today we're going to discuss how you start a charcoal portrait. Now that you have a sketch resolved and transferred onto your charcoal paper, it should look something like this. I have my resource photo, and on my resource photo, the first thing I want to do is look at where all the major, lightest tones are, or sometimes we call those highlights for the really bright areas, but the really light areas. And I'm kind of marking those off with my mind and my hands right now, looking at my portrait. Those are areas I want to start to avoid. And then I also want to look at areas that are very dark. Those are areas that I want to pay attention to as well because I want to know the full range of values on this face. This is a drawing. This is my daughter I'm drawing. The materials I want to start with are charcoal pencil, a white chalk pencil, and a white chalk stick. Additionally, like something like a Q-tip, blending with your finger, blending with a paper towel, or a blending tool is excellent. And also having a handy dandy sharpener to keep your charcoal pencils sharp. Um, so really, you want to start with a sharp point. And you want to find a place where it's a good spot to draw. I would never really start with the hair. I would start more on something like something inside the face. So today I'm going to start on my daughter's nose, move into the eye and the cheek to get started with this drawing. I feel very comfortable starting in the nose area, so that's where I want to begin. So number one, I'm going to identify some subtle outlining in certain parts of the nose, like on the nostril, where I see areas that have definitive edges. And then what I'm going to do is with some very light work with the pencil, and I'm talking about not pushing down with the pencil at all, just really light shading of where midtones are appearing on the nose. So what I'm doing is avoiding all those light or highlighted areas on those, and I'm going to add some subtle hatch shading here. Hatching is when you're bringing in like subtle lines like this, very similar to how you would start shading in pencil. This is going to help me define my areas of value. So as I build up tone and value ranges, I have an um, established tone already. So if you compare it to my photograph on the right, you'll see why and where I'm putting down these subtle grays. Avoiding the highlights at this time is very important so you can start to develop form in your picture. If you get dark in a highlighted area, you'll lose form pretty quickly. My upper eyelid, it's got a strong edge, so I'm going to outline that so I can identify it. I'm even going to outline that little highlight there. Looking deeper, I can see my pupil inside my iris. Again, when you outline, don't outline heavy, just get it to identify an edge of something if you need to see that. I'm doing a fill in the iris here because that's all needs some darkness in there. But I'm not filling it so much that I can't separate the iris from the pupil, as you can see. You can still see those edges. I could start with a blending tool, but it's not very smart right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the white chalk once I've established some shading with the pencil, and I'm going to work that into the areas that are really bright, like the highlighted areas on the nose and on the cheek and close to the eye. Kind of those will start to work in and alongside the black charcoal material I put in. You're going to see it's going to turn to a lighter, cloudier gray just by them smushing together. At this point, I haven't blended with my fingers or anything yet, but I can start doing that now, just very subtly. Don't need to push down hard. It's just start to smudge like this. At this point, you can apply other blending tools for tighter areas, but this is just to get you started. By no means will your finished drawing look as rough as it does now. It's going to look a little smudgy and undefined right now. But as we build layers now, as you can see in the eye, I can now come in with a second layer and start to really darken up my values to the correct ranges as I see in the photograph. White chalk pencil is excellent to bring into tight areas. And by building that and the black charcoal pencil together, they actually self-blend when you're working them together subtly. Again, try to keep a sharp point, so I always want to keep my sharpener handy. So this works very much like pencil work here. Remember, white and black make gray. So the more black you use, um, you'll create a darker gray. The more white you use, you'll create a lighter gray. So knowing how the formula and how much you want to use is something you'll work with and understand more as you use the charcoal to see how dark you really need to get and how much material you need to use. The web of shadows on this face do merge. So at this time, I'm going to start to kind of push my highlights up, also push my darks up, and start to subtly blend them together to create smoother results. So what started off as something that was kind of rough at first is now getting more defined as I build up my shadows and my details. And you're going to find that putting layers on top of layers now is going to create smoother effects when you blend with your finger, because the more material that goes down in layers, um, the easier it is to blend the material together. It's typically the hardest to blend the material when you only have a little bit in the beginning of the drawing. But at this time now, layers are starting to meld together and softly merge. As you can see on like the bottom of my nose there, getting some nice soft shadows. Notice on my nostril on the left, I didn't need to outline that nostril because the shadows around it are what create the shape of the nostril. So avoid outlining too much. If you have a pencil line from your sketch that you need to get rid of, just use an eraser. You can erase charcoal and chalk pencil to a certain extent. So have a eraser handy if you need to clean up an area. Now I'll move on to the cheekbone. So if you'll notice, her cheek is very light, but it's the areas around it that are grayer that make the roundness of her cheekbone pop. So I'm going to work in those areas with the black charcoal. And then I'm going to come in with the white chalk now in the highlighted areas and work it in and start to blend. You'll notice I'm merging my cheekbone into my eye area and into my nose. And that's how you want to do a charcoal drawing. You want to start in one area and continue merging areas together um, to build the form of the face. Now the cheekbone's an interesting thing. The shadows connect to the jaw, down to the mouth, to the nose. So if you just if you only focus specifically on the cheekbone area, the cheek might not feel as finished until it's merged with all the other areas around it. Again, use whatever blending tools you feel are most comfortable. I love using blending with my finger the most. Um, Coming in with the white chalk here to bring some lighter tones because that area got a little bit too dark. I'm not going to finish the portrait here. I'm going to be finishing up pretty soon. This is about how to get started, and you'll be able to work all the flesh tones in how I'm working here. And the hair is a different beast sometimes, especially on my daughter's hair because it's curly. There's going to be more line work and drawing later. So I'll do another tutorial on hair and even some things like some separate features of the face like teeth and eyebrows and stuff like that. So if you notice how I started the drawing to how I finished, things look a lot smoother, a lot more lifelike and realistic now because the shadows have so many variations in it now. It's not just a dark and a light. You have midtones, you have darker midtones, lighter grays, and all that coming together creates a more realistic, fleshy look to create a more realistic portrait. I hope that helped. Review this anytime you need to, everybody, okay? And just remember, you build lightly and you'll get fantastic results.